In this lecture, we're going to talk about the history of Perplexity and Comet. Now, if you've taken many of my courses, you know I often like to start a course covering the history or background of whatever product or tool that the course centers around. And I really enjoy doing this. And I think most of my students enjoy it too. Learning a little bit about the background, especially if you're new, like Comet. Comet, this is being recorded in August of 2025. Comet is just now on its way to being released, so it's not well known yet, but it's going to be. And Perplexity's been around since 2022. But a lot of people aren't really familiar with Perplexity and certainly not familiar with Comet. So I always enjoy, doing a first lecture or maybe part one or maybe a two-part lecture on the history of a product. If you don't enjoy this, you can skip this. Not everybody's into this, but I really enjoy digging into the background of a product and learning the history of it, who founded it, what were the founding principles, what's it based on, and things like that. So we're going to cover the history of Perplexity and Comet because Comet obviously is part of Perplexity. It's released by Perplexity, and so you can't really separate the two. So Perplexity AI, let's start there. It's an American company that has rapidly grown since its founding in 2022. So it was released roughly three years ago, and it absolutely challenges traditional search engines with conversational AI powered search. And you're probably aware of this. I use Perplexity every day. I love it. I think it's an awesome tool. And I really enjoy using it and get so much out of it. And it has challenged traditional search engines, especially Google. I used to live on Google, and now I don't go there 10% of the time that I used to. So it's built on advanced language models, LLMs, large language models, and emphasizes factual accuracy and citation. Now, this is one of the things I really like about Perplexity is when you do a search on Perplexity, it gives you a whole list of citations on where it got the information from. That can be extremely useful. And then, as I said, in August of 2025, Perplexity launched Comet. I'm not really thrilled about the name, but I'm sure they did a lot of research and came up with this name for some reason, and it is what it is. But Comet is an AI native browser, the first of its kind as far as I know. So its aim is to revolutionize the internet usage by embedding agentic AI, we're going to talk about that in just a minute, directly into the browsing experience. And we're going to see how powerful this is later in the course. Empowered by context threading, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, and automation capabilities. Okay, so I mentioned context threading. So it's empowered by context threading. Well, in Perplexity Comet, what this refers to is the browser's capability to remember and connect and build upon the entire history of your queries, commands, and tasks throughout a browsing session or even across sessions. Now, you may think, oh, okay, big deal, that's nice. Well, it's very, very important, especially in certain situations. Like if you're a software developer, as I have been most of my career, but now I'm doing a lot of no-code development where I'm creating these apps using tools that generate the code for me. In order for that to work, in order to create the correct code, it's got to feed in a lot of the code that's already been written. Okay, that's called context window or context threading. Comet works the same way. So if you have an ongoing thread that you're doing research on, your entire context of the entire thread, the entire context is fed into your next query, the next thing that you're going to ask Comet, and it makes the responses that you get back much more relevant, much more accurate. That's what context threading refers to. And then I mentioned agentic AI, which is an artificial intelligence that can make decisions and take action on its own. All right, now let's stop there for a second. On its own. In other words, you're not telling it what to do. It knows what to do, it knows how to do it, and it knows when to do it. And that's sort of the concept of agentic AI. Okay, so on its own to achieve a specific goal without waiting for humans to tell it every step. That's an incredibly powerful thing if handled correctly. Now, the first thing I think about whenever I think about agentic AI and these tools that are doing things on their own is that movie back from 2001, A Space Odyssey. Now, that's going back 24 years at least, and a lot of you probably never saw that movie, but there was a computer. This guy was in space, Dave. His name was Dave. And he was in space, and he told the computer to do something, and the computer said, "No, Dave, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't want to do that." And so basically, this computer had a mind of its own. Well, that's sort of the way all of this is going. So unlike traditional AI, which follows fixed rules or just responds to commands, agentic AI is more like a proactive helper, somebody who is uber smart and understands what needs to be done and figures out the best way to do it, even adapting as things change. Okay, so the Comet browser is based on this agentic AI. Okay, so founding and early development. So Perplexity AI. Now, this is not a course on Perplexity. Now, we'll cover certain aspects of Perplexity as we need to in relation to Comet. But this is not a course on Perplexity. In fact, Udemy has a number of courses on Perplexity, very well done. I actually considered doing a course on Perplexity, but there's a number of courses already out there that do that quite well, so I decided to pass on that. That's not really necessary. But we will discuss relevant aspects. And I'm going to start with the founding and early development. So as I mentioned, Perplexity was founded just about 3 years ago by some very, very smart people. So Srinivas here, the CEO previously at OpenAI, DeepMind, Google Brain, this guy is a deep mind. He is one smart guy, and he is the CEO of the company. And then the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, was formerly with Meta, also known as Facebook, Alphabet, that whole group there. And then Johnny Ho, the Chief Strategy Officer, previously at Quora, Tower Research Capital, and so on. These are smart guys behind this product. And then the co-founder of Databricks, Konwinsky, is also part of the early development of Perplexity. So you can see there's some pretty significant brain power behind the company and Comet. So the founders basically shared a vision to build a search engine which delivers direct, context-sensitive answers to complex queries. And I am constantly blown away by how good Perplexity is. And that's what got me excited about Comet, because if Comet is anywhere near as good as Perplexity, Google's in big trouble with their Chrome browser. I mean, I've been a Chrome user for years and years. I use Edge to a lesser extent, but Microsoft, I think, lost the browser wars a long time ago. So moving beyond the limitations of traditional search engines, they rely on fragmented hyperlinks and advertisements, which Google does. Google just returns hyperlinks. That's basically what it does, and ads. I mean, how many of us are just sick of all the ads that we see? Well, that's what Google lives on, and they're dying on that hill as well. Okay, so in December 2022, here's some growth and evolution of the product, which leads up to Comet. December 2022, Perplexity launches its main AI-powered search engine. Okay, so the company was founded in August 2022, but the first major release was December 2022. You can read through this. I'm just going to hit the highlights here. And then in 2023, monthly active users jumped to 10 million. Can you imagine that? So it's publicly released in December of 2022. In 2023, I'm not sure what that, let's just say at the end, let's just say in 1 year, they garner 10 million users. Wouldn't you love to create a product that generated 10 million users and then raised a whole bunch of money that you can see here during that year? 24, 25, the user base climbs, and in May of 2025, Perplexity handled 780 million queries in 1 month. Can you imagine the computer resources required to service that many queries? Just amazing. 20% monthly growth, amazing. And then reaches a $9 billion, that's with a B, $9 billion valuation in late 2024, 14 to 18 billion in mid 2025, and a $500 million funding round closed in earlier this year. And then it's created some strategic initiatives, some partnerships here, some new products, Perplexity pages, and so on. And you may have noticed there's, well, and of course the one new product now is Comet, but there's also some new features in Perplexity that I really enjoy, like spaces. I love using spaces to separate all of my queries. Perplexity labs and so on. Okay, so I don't want to get into all that. This is not a course. If I'm not careful, I'm going to start teaching on Perplexity, which I would love to do, but I don't want to do that. So anyway, this is it's got a fascinating history.